I never thought something as simple and as necessary as a tornado siren could cause so much chaos. But then again, I also didn't think I'd find myself battling a neighborhood HOA in retirement. After 35 years working as a meteorological engineer, doing contract work with FEMA and state disaster planning, I thought I had earned the right to peace, quiet, wide lawns, and clean streets in this quiet little community in eastern Oklahoma. But silence, as I would learn, can be deadly. I bought the house at the end of Linwood Trail, a corner lot with enough open space for my old personal radar dish, a small weather tower, and, yes, a personal tornado siren I had salvaged, refurbished, and installed discreetly on a reinforced pole behind my garage. It was a short-range alert system, calibrated to activate only when I detected specific, violent velocity signatures, not for every thunderstorm. It was surgically precise. I even added a soft test mode, barely louder than a distant car alarm, to run monthly diagnostics. The day I finished calibrating it, I stood in the backyard, arms crossed, and felt a rare sense of quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about control or science. It was about protecting people. Because I've stood in the rubble. I've pulled bodies from basements, and I wasn't going to let my neighbors suffer because someone thought safety equipment was ugly. I should have expected the first shot. A note was taped to my door in a plastic sleeve, unofficial Blackwood Crest Community Stationery, gold trim, bold serif font, signature at the bottom from Brenda Thorne, HOA President. It read like a scolding from a high school principal, accusing me of violating neighborhood aesthetic policies by installing an unauthorized mechanical structure. No mention of function, no questions, just an order. Remove the siren within 7 days to avoid penalties. I laughed. I honestly thought it was a misunderstanding. I called the number, then printed a short letter explaining the siren's purpose, along with my FEMA certifications, license details, and a polite request to meet in person, even offering to speak at a community safety meeting. 3 days later, Brenda Thorne was knocking, or rather, pounding, on my door. She was exactly what the stationery suggested, early 50s. Tightly wound blonde bob, manicured nails gripping a leather folder like a courtroom exhibit. She didn't say hello. She pointed at the siren visible over my fence and snapped, "That needs to go. It's creating panic. It's not even active yet. It's calibrated to only go off." "It's a siren, Mr. Sterling," she cut in, emphasizing the word like it was profane. "Our community values tranquility. You can't have that blaring and upsetting our children and pets every month." "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level, "that's the test cycle. It's as quiet as a distant horn. You'd hear worse from a leaf blower." "We didn't approve it," she snapped, pulling out papers, "and our bylaws prohibit the installation of any visible utility equipment not expressly authorized by the board." I felt the weariness build in my chest, the tension of being talked down to like I didn't know what I was doing. I've worked disaster response for most of my adult life. That siren could save lives. We have city sirens. "We don't need yours," she countered. "And frankly, I don't appreciate fear-mongering. We haven't had a serious tornado in this region in over 6 years." I opened my mouth, then closed it. It wasn't worth debating storm statistics with someone who thought anecdotes were evidence. I'd be happy to discuss this with the full board. "You can bring it up at the next HOA meeting," she said, already walking away, "but you'll still be fined $75 per day starting Friday if it's not removed." That night, I drafted my formal appeal, but deep down I realized they didn't care what I knew. They cared what I looked like. By the time I showed up at the HOA meeting the following Tuesday, I was already the community pariah. Brenda stood at the podium, adjusting her blazer, and announced sweetly, "A new homeowner on Linwood Trail has installed a large industrial-grade siren in their backyard without board approval, deemed out of compliance with the visual integrity standards." She didn't use my name, but everyone turned toward me. I stood slowly. "My name is Noah Sterling," I said, walking to the front, "and I'd like to respectfully correct the record. I am a retired meteorological engineer. The siren I installed is a civilian-grade weather alert system designed for private use, programmed to sound only during verified tornadoic rotation within 2 miles of this neighborhood. I held up my paperwork. Nowhere in the bylaws is there an explicit prohibition against non-commercial emergency equipment installed within private property lines. Brenda's smile tightened. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, you're not in charge of neighborhood safety. That's what city emergency systems are for. City sirens have a known delay, I replied calmly. During a fast-moving EF3, you could lose 30 to 60 seconds of warning. That's the difference between making it to your basement or not. A woman near the front whispered. I didn't even notice the test cycle. Brenda ignored her completely. We will now vote to enforce the removal order, Brenda announced. Then let the record show I am submitting a formal objection backed by documentation, I stated, my voice steady. I worked with the Oklahoma State Emergency Management Office for 12 years, and I still hold an inactive advisory credential. If the city deems my setup to be legal and beneficial, your board can't override that. The room went silent. Brenda's nostrils flared. Then I suggest you go talk to the city. In the meantime, the violation notice stands. We'll be fining you $75 per day starting Friday. The next day, the psychological warfare began. Someone had egged the siren pole. Then came the final warning letters, stamped with red ink, threatening a compounded fine of $150 a day and lien placement proceedings on my property. They were weaponizing paper, clinging to a fragile power. Then came the final shot, a public HOA email with the subject line, Severe Weather and Community Guidelines. It read, Residents are advised to remain calm during this week's forecast. Please do not respond to unauthorized alarms or take shelter based on non-city signals. Any rogue alerts should be ignored. They had told people to ignore a tornado just to preserve the illusion of control. I made one last effort. I printed a simple flyer with a radar map and a warning in bold letters. Unstable conditions building west of county. If sirens sound, take shelter immediately. City systems may delay. This is your backup. Use it. I walked door to door, leaving them in mailboxes. Only Mrs. Delaney thanked me. The legal showdown came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the backyard when an unmarked white truck pulled up. A contractor, wearing a faded red shirt, approached the mast with a clipboard. We're here, Brenda announced triumphantly, walking up behind him, to inspect and disable your unauthorized siren system. I blocked the contractor's path. Do you have a court order? Because if you don't, what you're about to do is illegal. Tampering with registered emergency equipment, especially one inspected and documented by the State Emergency Office, is a criminal offense in Oklahoma. The contractor froze, looking at Brenda, then at me. They didn't say anything about legal stuff, he muttered. I'm not doing this. He walked back to his truck, leaving Brenda fuming. You're escalating this, Mr. Sterling. She hissed. Karen, you're one step away from violating federal emergency codes. Do you really want this to go to court? There was a pause. Then she said coldly, We'll see how long you can keep this up, and stalked off. That night, the skies turned a deep, electric gray. A pressure trough was tightening just west of the Arkansas River. The wind was hot, wrong for the season. I knew it in my gut, honed by decades of listening to the wind. Something was coming, and no HOA fine in the world would stop it. That Thursday afternoon, the air felt wrong. The birds were quiet. The trees didn't sway. They braced. My internal barometer dropped 4 millibars in 90 minutes. My radar panel lit up with the signatures I had learned to trust more than any forecast. I didn't need to wait for the meteorologist downtown. I jogged around back to the siren mast. My hand hovered over the manual trigger. I would rather lose sleep in another round of HOA lawsuits than lose someone's child to a collapsed roof. I pressed the trigger. The siren wound up with that slow, rising scream, cutting through the heavy air like a knife. Across the street, Brenda burst out of her house. I saw her expression from 50 feet away, outrage and disbelief, like I had personally insulted her by alerting the neighborhood to impending death. She shouted something I couldn't hear, pointing at the siren, then disappeared back inside. The city siren in the far distance finally echoed the warning, faint and late. Mine had sounded first, and then the sky turned green. Not metaphorically, literally, the color of hail cores and violent updrafts, the color of catastrophe. The power flickered. I watched Brenda burst back out of her house with a phone pressed to her ear, frantically dialing, still screaming at me, pointing at the siren like it was the enemy. She was so consumed by her fury and her illusion of control that she didn't notice the unnatural way the trees bent. She didn't notice the funnel forming in the sky behind her. I shouted across the street, "Karen, get inside, now!" She turned mid-sentence, saw my face, not anger but fear, and turned to look behind her. The tornado touched down half a mile out, a pale gray whip twisting from the clouds, dancing down like a ghost with claws, and it was headed straight for us. She froze. I sprinted across the yard, dodging hailstones, grabbed her arm, and dragged her toward my house, into my garage, and into the storm shelter embedded in the floor. I slammed the steel hatch shut just as the debris began to hit the house. The lights went out. The roar began. Inside, Karen sat shaking, her mouth open but silent. We both listened as the world outside bent, broke, and howled. I had tried to warn them. They had not listened. And now the sky was screaming for them instead. When the deep, bone-deep silence finally settled, I slowly cracked the hatch. The air that rushed in smelled like damp earth and insulation. My garage roof was half gone. My radar dish lay crumpled on the lawn, but the siren mast still stood. Across the street was a different story. Brenda's house was gone. The entire back half had been sheared off, exposing insulation, twisted metal, and the splintered remains of furniture. Windows were blown out. Her rose garden flattened. She just stood there, frozen, waiting for someone to tell her it was a mistake. Within the hour, emergency crews began arriving. I directed them where I could, pointing out houses, acting as an unofficial liaison. No one questioned me. I was simply the man who had known. Karen followed me, wordless, like a shadow. Then an EMT jogged toward us. "We just checked the south corner," she said breathlessly. "Those homes didn't get the city alert in time. Half the systems failed. But," she paused, glancing toward my yard, "that siren. That thing probably saved lives tonight." Brenda looked down at her feet. I didn't say a word. The EMT's confirmation was only the beginning of the reckoning. Down the street, the fire crew was trying to free her husband, Greg, whose leg was trapped under a collapsed beam in the kitchen. "Wait," I said, stepping up beside the firefighter. "There's a crawl space under that section. If we dig in from behind through the flower beds, we can get to him without cutting." I had seen the blueprints of this model. 3 of us scrambled to the side yard and started digging by hand. Karen was there too, on her knees, mud on her blouse, her hands bleeding from clawing at the earth. "I should have listened," she whispered as we worked. "I told Greg it was nothing. I said your siren was a nuisance." We dug until the faint, muffled sound of a man groaning was audible. When we finally broke through, I was the first to squeeze into the space to reach him. I stabilized his leg with a split U4 and signaled for a stretcher. We pulled him out an hour later, alive. Karen fell beside him, sobbing. By midnight, the fire captain approached me, his helmet tucked under his arm. "You're Noah, right? The guy with the siren. Your system gave people a head start. We estimate at least 60 seconds. That's everything." "I did what anyone would do," I said. "No," he corrected. "You did what few have the guts to do. You stood alone, and you were right." The next morning, Brenda came over to my damaged house, stripped bare of her position and pretense. She looked up at me, not with hostility, but with genuine humility. "I wanted to say thank you," she murmured. "I was wrong. About all of it. I let my pride. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but I wasn't protecting anyone." "I'm not looking for revenge, Karen," I finally said. "I was only ever looking for respect, for the science, for the risk, for the people who live here." She nodded. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately. I've already spoken to the other members. They're calling a special meeting next week to rewrite the emergency bylaws. Your system will be officially recognized. You'll be given full exemption. It was more than I expected. Institutional change had been achieved not through lawsuits, but through consequence. Weeks later, the neighborhood turned into a temporary construction zone. I spent most of my days coordinating between families and recovery crews. The storm had left its mark, but it had also reset the board. The HOA was dissolved and reformed into a transparent cooperative. A new bylaw amendment was unanimously passed. No safety equipment could be restricted without cause verified by certified safety authority. The Siren stayed. It was upgraded, funded by community donations, and its new sign read, Community Early Warning System, in honor of preparedness. One afternoon, Brenda brought me a small potted rose bush. "It's from the ones that survived," she said softly. "They're tougher than they look." I planted it near the base of the Siren. She had lost her house, but she had lost her certainty, and that was what saved her. The community had finally arrived, but it took the storm to reveal it. Sometimes late at night I walk out into my yard and stare up at the sky. The trauma is still there. You don't go through a tornado, physical or social, without scars, but I had found stillness in the place that had once rejected me. The Siren now stands tall, no longer a symbol of rebellion, but a reminder of what it means to stand firm, to warn even when no one wants to hear it, to love a place enough to fight for it. And in that earned peace after the storm, I finally found my silence. My warning saved lives, yet I was almost fined into oblivion for aesthetics. Where do you draw the line between a community's right to aesthetics and an individual's right to safety? And was it right that it took a disaster to finally make the truth louder than the tyranny? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.